Stop. Right now, stop for a moment and let these words reach the part of you that has been carrying too much in silence. You are not imagining the weight you have been feeling. You are not too sensitive, and you are not late. There is a pressure in your chest that has not been easy to name, a tiredness that sleep does not fully touch, and a question inside you that keeps returning in the quiet hours when no one is watching. By the time I finish speaking, you are going to recognize the signs that have been following you, understand the pattern that has been repeating around your life, and hear the reason this message arrived tonight with such precision. Stay with me, because what I am about to name is not random, and it is not small. You are being given more than comfort. You are being given recognition. You are being given the kind of clarity that does not shout, but settles deep enough to change the way you carry your own life. This is not for the crowd. This is for the one who keeps showing up, keeps waiting, keeps listening, even when the world around them has learned how to move past what hurts. It reached you by appointment, and you know it. What has been happening to you is not just a mood, and it is not just a season passing by. Something has been moving around you in layers, and the signs have been quieter than you expected, which is why they have been so easy to miss. You may have noticed that certain mornings feel strangely heavier the moment you open your eyes, as if your body wakes before your mind has found its footing. You lie still for a second longer than usual, and there is a pressure behind your ribs. Not exactly fear, not exactly grief, but a kind of inward pulling that makes even the early light feel serious. Then the day begins, and you move through familiar tasks with a strange distance in your own heart. You make the coffee, wash the dishes, answer the message, drive the same road, stand in the same line, and yet something inside you keeps saying, "This is not the same place I was standing before." It is a small sentence, almost nothing, but it returns. There are moments when a conversation from the past comes back to you, and what once felt important suddenly feels thin in your hands. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. Words you used to defend, roles you used to carry, explanations you used to repeat, all of it begins to lose its old force. You hear yourself thinking, why did I keep holding that so tightly? Why did I call that enough? Why did I stay there so long? That is not confusion, that is separation. And there have been those repeated little markers that you cannot easily dismiss. A number on a receipt, a clock catching your eye at the exact same moment again and again, a phrase spoken by a stranger that seems to answer a prayer you never said aloud, a songline you hear in the car, then hear again later in a completely different place, as though the world is tapping twice on the same door. You have noticed that too. You have felt the pause when something repeats. You have felt the hush inside you when a detail arrives twice, or 3 times, or in a way that makes your spirit sit up straighter. You are not being haunted by coincidence. You are being visited by confirmation. So do not call these signs a problem. Do not call them instability. Do not call them a breakdown just because they are interrupting the old pace of your life. What is happening is that something in you is no longer able to pretend that the old explanations are enough. These signs mean that your inner world is answering before your outer world catches up. They mean that the part of you that has been silent for too long is beginning to recognize its own language again. They mean that what used to slide past you without notice is now landing with weight, because your hearing has changed. And that change matters more than you think, because when a life begins to notice differently, it begins to live differently. When a heart begins to recognize differently, it begins to refuse what once kept it small. When your spirit begins to answer to truth again, it stops agreeing with anything lesser. Take one breath and let that settle. You do not need to force an answer out of this moment. Just let the recognition sit where it wants to sit, because what comes next is the first small agreement between your hearing and your voice. If even one of those signs landed in you, if your shoulders lowered when you heard yourself described, type the number 888 in the comments. That is the frequency of overflow, and it names the place where what has been withheld begins to move again. Type 888, then come back to me, but there is something beneath these signs. Beneath those repeated moments is one single pattern. And once you see it, you will begin to recognize why so much has felt delayed, even when you have done everything you knew how to do. The pattern is this: you have learned how to keep going without fully receiving. You have learned how to function while postponing your own need. You have learned how to remain dependable while remaining unseen. And because you became so skilled at carrying weight, you started calling the carrying itself a kind of strength, even when it was costing you your peace. This pattern does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like being the one everyone counts on, while no one notices the tremor in your voice after the call ends. Sometimes it looks like smiling in the room and unraveling in the car. Sometimes it looks like saying you are fine, because that is easier than explaining how tired you are of being the one who understands everyone else. And it has shown up across your life in more than one form. It has shown up in the way you hesitate before asking for help, as though your need must first prove itself worthy. It has shown up in the way you minimize what you feel, as though naming your ache clearly would somehow make you demanding. It has shown up in the way you keep extending grace to places that never learned how to return it. You have not been failing. You have been repeating an old arrangement. That matters, because once a pattern is seen, it can no longer pretend to be fate. It can no longer hide behind your habits and call itself your identity. It can no longer sit in the middle of your life and speak as if it has authority over everything you are becoming. And I need you to hear this carefully. This was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was proof that you adapted. It was proof that you survived. It was proof that you learned how to stay standing in places that asked for more than they gave back. But survival has a cost when it becomes the only language you know. It narrows the chest. It tightens the jaw. It teaches the heart to expect less and call that wisdom. It makes a person efficient, and then it makes them empty in places no one else can see. So yes, the pattern has served you in one season, but it has also kept you from receiving what your life has quietly been asking for. It has made you expert at endurance and cautious with abundance. It has made you fluent in sacrifice and hesitant with rest. And that is why this message is not only about signs, it is about the layer underneath the signs, the older place where the pattern first took root. And that layer is where we go now. Imagine a courtyard at the center of a house that has stood for many years. Imagine that courtyard as the place where light gathers, where footsteps echo, where everyone eventually crosses, whether they arrive in celebration or in grief. In the beginning, that courtyard was open. It received rain without fear. It held the morning sun without asking permission. It was meant to be a place of passage and breath. But over time, something was built around it. At first it was only a shade here, a wall there, a place to store what was too heavy to leave in the open. Then another structure was added, and another, until the courtyard was still there, but no longer fully visible. It remained at the center, but it was increasingly covered. People still passed through, life still happened. Yet the place that once welcomed light began to live under layers of old construction. That is what has happened inside you. You were not born closed. You were not born guarded in the deepest place. You were not born convinced that your own need had to wait at the edge of the room. Something was added around you over time, a caution, a responsibility, a silence, a learned habit of bracing before receiving. And the saddest part is that you became so familiar with the additions that you started mistaking them for the original design. You thought the covering was the courtyard. You thought the weight was the structure. You thought the restriction was just your nature. It was not. What was built around you began as protection, or at least it called itself that. It told you to be careful. It told you not to expect too much. It told you to keep the center covered so nothing precious could be touched. But what it protected you from in one season also prevented you from being known in another. A courtyard that never opens stays shaded too long. A place made for light cannot flourish under constant covering. A heart made for communion cannot thrive under permanent restraint. That is why you have felt the strange ache of standing in your own life while sensing that something central remains unreachable. This is not because your center is broken, it is because it has been covered. And some of those coverings were placed there by moments you did not control. A sharp word that made you retreat. A betrayal that taught you to hold back. A season of being overlooked until you learned to shrink your own request before anyone else could reject it. You did what you had to do. You stayed protected long enough to continue, but what protected you then began to define you now. That is the silent history inside the image. A courtyard meant for open air, layered over by years of cautious building. A center made to receive, narrowed by habit into something more guarded than alive. And still, even there, the original design remains underneath. Because stone remembers sunlight, because open spaces remember sky, because the place that was meant for breath does not forget breath forever. And this is the part I want you to feel. The return does not begin with force. It begins with exposure. It begins when the old coverings are named for what they are. It begins when you stop calling every layer me and start seeing which parts were only added. There is a tenderness in that recognition. There is also power, because once you know what was built, you can begin to let the center be seen again. If that courtyard you just pictured feels like your own life, if you can sense the place where light once lived and still wants to live, type the words "I see it" in the comments. Let it be your witness that the image has landed where it needed to land. Type it, then come back to me. And here is what comes next. The coverings do not get the final word. The center does not stay hidden forever. The place that was made to receive begins to open again. The return is not you becoming someone else. The return is you coming back to what was never meant to be buried. It is not a performance. It is not a reinvention. It is a homecoming, quiet and steady, deeper than effort and older than the fear that tried to name you. You do not need to manufacture this return with strain. You do not need to chase it like something far away. What you need is to receive what has already been pressing toward you in mercy. The opening is not born from your force. It is born from your willingness. And there are two practices in that return, though they are not practices of proving. They are practices of receiving with attention, of tending what has begun to stir, of allowing the center to breathe without demanding that it explain itself first. The first is the morning seal. When you wake, before you reach for the noise of the day, place one hand where your breath is easiest to feel. Do not rush past the first minutes of the morning. Stay there long enough to notice whether your chest is tight, whether your jaw is set, whether your body is already braced, as if it expects the day to ask for more than it should. Then say, slowly and honestly, "This is not my burden to carry alone." Say it even if you feel awkward. Say it even if you have said it before. Say it as a seal over the morning, because the first agreements you make shape the rest of the day more than you think. You are not declaring that nothing will be required of you. You are declaring that you will not begin by abandoning yourself. The second is the frequency audit. At the end of the day, before you let the night blur everything together, ask yourself where your energy went and whether it was spent in truth or in surrender to old pressure. Notice what left you lighter, what left you smaller, what left you feeling as though you had been carrying someone else's expectation inside your own bones. Do this without accusation. Do it with honesty. Not every drain is dramatic. Sometimes it is the 1,000 tiny yeses you gave to things that had no right to your center. Sometimes it is the habit of explaining yourself to people who were never listening closely enough to deserve the explanation. Sometimes it is simply forgetting that your own inner weather matters too. These are not tasks for performance. They are acts of stewardship. You are learning how to tend the courtyard again. You are learning how to clear what blocks the light without becoming cruel to yourself in the process. You are learning that care is not the same as strain, and devotion is not the same as depletion. So do not treat your return like a race. Treat it like a home being opened room by room. Treat it like a threshold crossed slowly, with reverence, with patience, with a kind of dignity that says, I will not abandon what is being restored in me. And as you do that, something else begins to change. The air around you changes. The way you speak changes. The way you answer changes. The way you stop apologizing for needing space changes. The return reaches farther than one private moment, because what comes back inside you begins to alter the whole shape of your life. Let that settle for a moment. You are not behind. You are not broken beyond use. You are being returned to yourself in the places that mattered most. If this message has already become an amen without words in you, let your like be that quiet agreement, not as a metric, as a confirmation that what was named here was named correctly. Someone came to mind while I was speaking. You saw a person, or almost saw one. Maybe they are quiet in a way that hides how deeply they feel. Maybe they are tired in a way they keep polishing into competence. Maybe they carry faith or grief or responsibility so privately that no one around them would guess how much they have been holding. Send this to them, not as a suggestion, as a delivery. The same way it reached you, it can reach them by appointment. And maybe that is the kindness in this moment. You are not only receiving, you are becoming someone who can pass along what was given with care. You are no longer only the one who endures the message. You are also the one who helps it reach the next heart. That is part of the agreement forming here. You are the one who sees more clearly now. You are the one who hears differently now. You are the one who can carry this with gentleness instead of fear. Before this closes, type the words I am chosen in the comments, not as a wish, not as a hope, as a confirmation. Let your fingers do what your spirit is already doing. You are confirmed. You are being steadied. You are being gathered back into what is true. You are not standing at the edge of emptiness. You are standing at the edge of what is opening. You are not forgotten. You are being remembered in the places that matter. You are not late to your own life. You are arriving in clarity. Right now, all across the world, there are others receiving the same recognition in different rooms, at different hours, with different tears, and the same quiet relief. You are not alone in this hearing. You belong to a greater unfolding that does not need applause to be real. Walk gently in what has been named. Hold loosely what was never meant to own you. Keep the center open to the light that finds you. It is sealed. You are being held now by what you could not hold before. You are being covered now by what you once had to search for in the dark. You are being strengthened now by a mercy that does not ask you to prove you deserve it. You are being gathered now by a peace that moves with patience, not pressure. You are being led now into a gentleness that still has authority, still has weight, still has the power to rearrange what was once heavy in you. Stay with this for a moment, because the heart does not always trust what is good until it has repeated the feeling enough times to recognize its own safety. And what has been spoken over you is not a passing comfort, it is a settling. It is a reconnection. It is the quiet restoration of a center that was always meant to breathe. You have spent enough days bracing for impact. You have spent enough nights negotiating with your own thoughts. You have spent enough hours wondering whether what you carry is too much, too late, too delicate to survive. But the answer that is now surrounding you is not a correction of your worth. It is a remembrance of it. You are not being asked to become harder. You are being invited to become truer. You are not being asked to become louder. You are being invited to become clearer. You are not being asked to force open every door. You are being invited to stand where the door is already moving. That difference matters. It changes the way you breathe. It changes the way you wait. It changes the way you interpret the silence around you when no one is speaking, and yet something in the room feels alive with meaning. What you have felt is not empty distance. It is consecrated space. What you have felt is not abandonment. It is preparation. What you have felt is not delay without purpose. It is timing that has been working beyond the reach of your own sight. And because of that, you do not need to panic at the slow unfolding. You do not need to accuse yourself for not being farther along. You do not need to turn every pause into a verdict. Sometimes the sacred thing is not fast. Sometimes the sacred thing is precise. Sometimes the sacred thing arrives only after every false urgency has been stripped away, so that when it comes, you will recognize it without confusion. There is a kind of strength that no one claps for. It is the strength of remaining open when old disappointment would rather close you. It is the strength of continuing to believe that tenderness is not weakness. It is the strength of refusing to let pain become your permanent language. That strength is in you, even now. It has been there longer than your fear has been speaking. So do not mistake the trembling for failure. Sometimes trembling is the body learning safety again. Sometimes trembling is the soul returning to the place it left when it had to survive. Sometimes trembling is what happens when a long-held burden finally loosens enough to let light touch it. And this light is touching you, not to expose you in shame, not to overwhelm you in force, not to demand that you become someone else by morning. It is touching you to reveal what has remained untouched by every season that tried to define you too narrowly. It is touching you to remind you that the center still exists. It is touching you to call you by the name of the one who is not finished, not forgotten, and not left outside the story. You may not have words for everything that is changing. You may still feel the aftertaste of old heaviness in the back of your mind. You may still notice that some habits of fear rise up before they disappear. That is all right. The return is not always clean at the edges. Sometimes it comes with echoes. Sometimes it comes with resistance. Sometimes it comes with the strange feeling of standing in a familiar room and realizing that the room no longer has authority over you. That is what is happening now. The old room still exists, but it is no longer the whole house. The old voice still whispers, but it is no longer the only voice. The old story still tries to borrow your attention, but it is no longer the final interpretation. You are learning how to live from a deeper center, and that center is not built on panic, not built on performance, not built on the fragile approval of days that came and went too quickly to hold you. It is built on what remains when everything false has tired itself out, and what remains is not nothing. What remains is steadiness. What remains is dignity. What remains is the capacity to receive without shrinking. What remains is the right to be met where you are. What remains is the holy refusal to keep calling depletion a destiny. So when you rise tomorrow, rise with less accusation and more clarity. When you speak, speak without apologizing for being present. When you rest, rest without bargaining. When you choose, choose from a place that remembers you are allowed to matter. And when the old fear says you have no proof, answer with what your spirit already knows. You have the evidence of endurance. You have the evidence of survival. You have the evidence of every time you were carried through what should have broken you and did not. That is not small, that is not accidental, that is not the language of loss alone, that is the language of being kept. There is a wordless grace moving through all of this, and it is not asking you to understand every detail before you trust it. It is asking you to recognize the shape of mercy when it arrives in an ordinary hour, in an ordinary room, in an ordinary breath, that suddenly feels less constricted than the one before it. So breathe again. Breathe like someone who has been found. Breathe like someone whose heart no longer has to fight every quiet moment. Breathe like someone who can finally let the light reach the places that were protected for too long. This is the gentlest kind of turning, and also the most powerful. This is the turning where the inner door opens without a struggle. This is the turning where the center remembers its own name. This is the turning where you stop asking whether you are allowed to receive and begin living as if you already are. And yes, that changes everything. It changes the way you hear a promise. It changes the way you recognize a sign. It changes the way you stand when the next chapter begins to speak. Because now you know that what is coming does not need to be earned by your exhaustion. It does not need to be chased by your fear. It does not need to be forced by your urgency. It can arrive as gift, as appointment, as mercy, as a door opening only because it was always meant to. That is why your peace matters so deeply right now. Peace is not passivity. Peace is alignment. Peace is what happens when your inner life stops fighting the very grace that has been trying to find you. Peace is the evidence that the burden is no longer in charge of the room. So let the burden loosen. Let the breath return. Let the center breathe. Let the light remain. Let the old pressure lose its claim. Let the small, still voice become louder than the fear that once seemed larger than life. You are entering a season where what is true can finally stay true without being interrupted by the old noise. You are entering a season where your yes can be clean. You are entering a season where your no can be quiet and complete. You are entering a season where your heart does not have to translate its own pain into something more acceptable in order to be heard. That is a holy relief. That is a holy freedom. That is a holy beginning. And even now, even here, even in the midst of this stillness, you are not waiting alone. You are standing inside a larger kindness than your fear can measure. You are part of a movement of unseen restoration, a gathering of lives being brought back to themselves, one breath at a time, one honest yes at a time, one surrendered burden at a time. So keep listening, keep receiving, keep allowing the quiet to do what noise never could. Keep letting the center open. Keep letting what was covered be seen. Keep letting what was tired be held. Keep letting what was dim begin to shine again. The hand that found you is not withdrawing. The mercy that named you is not leaving. The peace that touched you is not pretending. It remains. It stays. It seals what it has begun. Walk from here without fear of the open space. Walk from here with the dignity of one who has been remembered. Walk from here with the calm certainty that what was spoken over you is already moving. Walk from here knowing that the light has already started its work. And when you hear the silence after this, do not mistake it for absence. It is the silence of something established. It is the silence of a door that no longer needs to strain. It is the silence of a truth that can remain steady without shouting. You are held. You are seen. You are being restored. You are being led. You are being kept. You are being brought home. It is sealed. Attention. You need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.